waiting for you. Fine. So after the hectic sessions yesterday, and after having a beautiful sleep last night, you might be feeling refreshed now. For a teacher, I often quote Guljar and say, उम्र जाया कर दी दूसरों का नुक्स निकालते निकालते इतना तरासा होता खुद को तो फरिश्ता बन गए होते. Fine. So this is actually the problem with us teachers. And many of you are also going to follow in the footsteps of a teacher. But I do believe that a teacher is a farista in this world. Fine. And we should try to make ourselves shine every other day. Now, today's lecture is titled Culture as an Effective Weapon in Classroom Teaching. Before I go into the depth of the discussion, let me take you to an episode. And the episode is about two people from different cultures. One is a Japanese and the other is an American. So the American professor was called to deliver a talk. And you know, as is customary that when you are invited to deliver a talk, so many people go to receive you. So in the very first event, two people went to receive him. And when they started, the American professor was very much surprised. Seat. He was left alone. I mean, the American professor was left alone. Throughout the way, this professor kept on thinking, since there was a lot of space in the rear seat, why I have been left alone? But he didn't express it. After this lecture, again after a week, he was called for another lecture. And this time, 3 people came to receive him. Surprisingly, all the 3 people, despite the fact there was too much of space in the rear seat, again they sat in the front seat. And you know, he started thinking, what is wrong with me? Why they are not able to sit by my side? And finally, he was actually reminded of another incident with the British people, where when he was called to a party, in a party of students, all these students were on one side and he was left alone. Then he asked somebody, what's wrong? Then the answer was, you and I are close friends. And the meaning is that we allow more room to our guests. Now see, this is where culture varies. And this variation of culture is the real talent. As I had said yesterday, that strength lies in difference, not in similarities. And we, as the prosperous teachers, on most of the occasions think that all the cultures are the same. And that is why at times there is a sort of cultural crisis. Students of literature might have read so many books, and especially when they read diasporic literature, they come across this cultural chaos, isn't it? Osima, for the first time when she is in the hospital, I think when I say Osima, I think all of you go back to that novel, Namesake. Yes. So there she feels that what a sort of world is this? She's actually waiting for a letter that will come from the Masima and the name will come, but the letter doesn't come. Even in the hospital, she is actually made to wear clothes which she was not habituated to. Again, nobody comes here. So she actually receives a sort of cultural shock. But my dear friends, we are actually living today in a world where we have to assimilate cultures, where we have to see that difference is also a matter of deference, not difference. We actually have to respect the difference. The world is beautiful because we differ in our cultures, in our customs. The problem with us is that when we as teacher or when we as a student enter a classroom, even though it is multilingual, multicultural, we sometimes or the other started thinking big of our culture and belittling others' culture. That's the problem. That is why Rajban Sahab has titled this course as Culturally Empowering Teachers. And teachers are to be culturally empowered, my dear friend. And all these lectures are a response to this. Now, today's title of the talk is Culture as an Effective Weapon in Classroom Teaching. Of course, we shall be talking about how we can train ourselves culturally. But before that, let's try to understand how can we. It's not working. Yes, it has started working. Now, the common idea about culture, most of us are familiar about. What's culture? Can you make it big? Can you make it big so that they can see? Can you make it big so that they can see? Yes. It is actually a set of beliefs, a set of myths, a set of customs and social behavior of any group. And every group will have a different sort of culture. And we have to ensure that we do not belittle others' culture, because we never know how and at what occasion, in what way people can be hurt culturally. So we have to be culturally very sensitive. When we teach culture, we actually use a word called culture nearsightedness. What is this culture nearsightedness? That when you start thinking that whatever is my culture should be their culture also, that is called cultural nearsightedness. But then we have to ensure that all cultures are different. You know my difference? German people, they smile too less, whereas American people, they smile too much. Fine. So what happens is Germans call Americans excessively cheerful, whereas Germans call Americans excessively cheerful, whereas Americans consider Germans to be hideous. This is the difference. And this difference at times creates a sort of barrier. We have to overcome this barrier because we are now living in a global world, and there we have to play our parts well. Now, why culture does matter in education? Because it affects your cognition. It affects your knowledge. It actually affects your sentiments and learning styles. Different cultures have different learning styles. I'm today very thankful to that gentleman, Ehtisham. Fine. Today, I never knew that this university had got such a sort of variety, and I was really mesmerized when I went to see Sayyid House. Fine. And when I went to see so many things here, so every day we are learning something or the other. But you know, what we do is on the surface level, we start discouraging, we start, giving disparaging remarks without knowing the cultural artifacts, without knowing the culture reams. Fine. As a linguist, I will say the culture reams. Am I right? Yes. So the question is, why does culture matter? It actually determines classroom engagement and student performance. Fine. And today it's very important that we ought to be aware of, because a person sitting at the last bench, even though he or she might not be responding to whatever you say or whatever you interrogate, but then that may be a part of his culture, that may be a sort of reverence. I do remember that once upon a time when I was in Northeast, the culture was completely different. If as a teacher you're walking on the roads and a student comes from the other side on the bicycle, suddenly one day I could see that the student was near to fall. I didn't understand what was it. Fine. And the same thing happened because I was new to that culture. And the same thing that happened time and again, whenever they saw me there, that one day I called one of my Assamese friends and said, "What is this?" They said that when they come across their teacher, they get down. Not only that, they actually used to keep their hats off when they used to come to their teacher. Now, see, what is this? What sort of rich culture was there? And whenever you stood on a square or on an intersection of roads, they will come to you and very silently they will ask you, "Sir, Balne, sir, how are you?" And they will come with a sort of tambul, which is called pan. Fine. Without asking you, they will come with it and they will give it to you. "Sir, etu grohan koribo," means please. It was actually 20 years ago. I still recall that culture. Fine. So this is how that culture can accommodate and culture can enrich. Unless and until, and I do remember one incident that in the early stages of my career, when I did not know a little bit of Assamese and I used to blabber in English, the classroom was full. I often used to think, do they really understand? One day, suddenly, I could see the principal was standing outside the classroom, and suddenly he entered the classroom, and then suddenly he asked a question to them. And the question was in Assamese, now I can understand. Apuni gom paina. The meaning is that, do you really understand? All of them said, "Sir, eko gom puanai." Means we didn't understand. But then the principal said, "But then why are you here? Apuni yat kene puase?" They said, "Sir, kintu khub dhuniya guy." The meaning is that sir speaks so well that we are so happy, whether we understand it or not. Now, this was actually a part of their culture, that they held their teachers in high respect, in high admiration. But then in other cultures, maybe if the student does not answer you back, you may actually become very harsh. You never know what actually impedes them, withholds them from speaking. So this is cultural enrichment, and we ought to develop that sort of tolerance, my dear friends. Now, what are the key topics of this presentation? Understanding the impact of the culture, how culture impacts us. And then we shall also be talking about how culturally responsive teaching can be, and how can we overcome cultural barriers, cultural challenges. Is it connected to that? Yes. Now, this is culture in the classroom includes language and dialects. I mean, there are several stages when you teach. Either it may be graduation, post-graduation, PhD. Now imagine a class where you as a teacher, very excited, you go to the classroom and start speaking, with all the sort of gusto, with all the sort of storm that you have. And then you say, I do not understand whether you understand my sesquipedalian sentences or not. Now, as a teacher, I have committed a blunder because I have used a word like sesquipedalian. I mean, on many occasions, we, without understanding the background of our audience members or our listeners, we think that whatever we say is being understood, but that is not. That is why, as I had asked yesterday also, what should you ask somebody when you are invited to a talk? The very first thing that you must ask, who are my target audience? Because you will orient your lecture according to the target audience, thinking, anticipating what their needs can be, forcing what they can understand, what questions might be troubling their minds. Now, when we talk about cultures, we also should be aware of traditions and beliefs. Of course, we cannot have a sort of expertise in all traditions and on all beliefs. But then when we go to a different culture, all that we can do is we need to observe in the beginning as to how they respond. Yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine who said that he had a friend in a different country and he invited once to his house. And he was very happy that since he was living there as a bachelor, so he thought that since he has invited me today, I'll have a dinner with him. Half an hour passed away. The gentleman did not ask him anything. And now when it was 40 minutes, he asked, can I get a cup of tea or something? And you know what was the response? The response was that in our culture, when we invite somebody, we understand that they are our very close people and our house is their house. So your entire house is yours. You can take whatever you want. You can eat whatever you want. Now, had we not, because we are ignorant of that, fine. So how could we overcome that? We could overcome that only when we learn a little bit about their culture. So it is very difficult though, but then we can always practice. Then learning styles and thinking. I mean, there are two sorts of culture. One is individualistic. I always say that the world is divided into two cultural zones. Fine. High context culture, low context culture. Fine. Especially in high context culture, people actually try to derive a lot of meaning out of even non-verbals, out of even non-words. But in high context culture, they will every now and then believe in the written word. Written word. For everything, they would seek a receipt. But high culture context people, they believe that there is more to say even without words, even in non-verbals. Now, let's try to understand. These are the various learning theories, behaviorism, fine. Then cognitivism, constructivism. Today, we are living in a different world. It is a digital world. Connectivism, isn't it? You need to connect. There are so many ways to learn today. Now, it is up to you to decide which you are going to choose and how you are going to get out of it. So please be connected to new things. Please see to it that you are digitally aware and you start joining workshops, conferences, e-talks, online lectures, depending upon your choices. Today, one of the very important things of the new education policy is that they are telling you, fine, for returning to your indigenous culture. That doesn't mean that your culture is only great, but so to the outside world that your culture has a sort of dominance, but other cultures are equally great. Yesterday, fine. Now, these are several cultural contexts: international, global, cross-cultural, intercultural. I think I started with the namesake. In namesake, the boy Gogol, fine, he actually feels himself quite insignificant when he finds that he is dwindling between two. Fine. He has got no friends, and his parents give him another name that is Nikhil. Am I right? Nikhil, yes. And then again, this Nikhil, he is actually straddling between Nikhil and Gogol. But when he comes to know what was behind his name Gogol, he actually feels very empathetic with his father. And then there comes a time when he actually goes with his father to the railway station, and on coming back, his father, some way or the other, tells him something. Then he realizes. That is why towards the end of the novel, you find Osima says, I have my time in US and the other half in Kolkata. I mean, we are divided. Still, we are actually maintaining the sort of assimilation. My dear friends, cultures may be different, but then you are to assimilate. Otherwise, you will prove yourself to be a sort of nowhere man. That's another book by Kamla Markandeya. Fine? Nowhere man, that despite having spent years and years, you feel that you are nowhere because you do not want to assimilate in that culture. Assimilation has a great strength, my dear friends. So now, intercultural, face-to-face interactions among people of different cultures. Please see to it that when we talk about the role of culture in shaping cognitive development, we also see to it that culture actually shapes your thinking. Culture should be accommodating. We always say in Indian culture, that Indian culture is very accommodating, and that is why we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The entire world is a family, and today we realize, but should that only be confined to the saying? Should that not have its real implication when we implement it? That is again a question that most of us should think about. Now here, let's take this quote. Learning is a process of acquiring knowledge, beliefs, and problem-solving strategies through guided interaction with more knowledgeable others. You have already seen we have a foreign faculty from Sweden, and we are trying to enrich ourselves with the innovative knowledge that she is going to impart to us. We always should try to learn from others, but then we are all human beings, and we at times become very critical, and we always believe that whatever is yours, that is only true, not the other side of it. Now, I think when we talk about culturally empowering, one thing that we come across is ensuring inclusivity in curriculum. Fine. That's very important. Nowadays, the focus is also on, we always say that let us try to take the lessons that our students are familiar with, culture that our students are familiar with, language that our students are familiar with, so that there is also an advocacy of teaching in the mother tongue, so that they can feel a sort of familiarity, and they can also feel a sort of inclusive. My dear friends, this inclusive had already been explained a lot by the foreign faculty yesterday, so I should not spend much time here, but please see to it that when we talk about inclusivity, we find that traditional curricula often reflect dominant cultural perspectives. But today is a world when we have to be very flexible. Flexibility is the hallmark. We should always see to it that other cultures are equally important as ours. We should not be rigid. We should not be ethnocentric. Rather, we should actually say to it that we believe in a thing that we have to be able to practice ethno-relativism. Ethno-relativism. Now, CRT. This is very important. Culturally responsive teaching, CRT. Actually, it encompasses cultural background. Fine. Unless and until we try to observe, unless and until we try to understand about other cultures, we perhaps write it off without having a knowledge of it. Every culture has its own significance. Every culture has its own importance, my dear friend. It actually connects to new content, to prior knowledge. Whatever we have, no? Yesterday, Professor Rijwan was using one word, very beautiful word, that we have to unlearn and then relearn, my dear friends. That actually should be our principle, that whatever we have learned, already we have learned, so let us also try to correct ourselves of the myths of the miasma that we have had. We should try to include something new that actually is taking place in the new world, in the modern world. Encourage cultural expression in learning. And how can we do that? Through reflective knowledge, experiential knowledge, and then academic knowledge. Fine? When you do something on your own, you get to know something, you feel that this is a sort of achievement that you have had. And if we do not, then simply we can write it off, and we cannot empower ourselves culturally. That is why we say most of the youngsters, they should attend conferences, go to conferences in different parts of the country, so that they can understand various cultural artifacts also, and they can also come across and they can exchange and enrich themselves with the knowledge that other people have, my dear friends. Now, let us take an example. Fine. Teachers always go by examples, allusions. A history teacher in a diverse classroom incorporates multiple perspectives when teaching about historical events. For example, instead of only using Western viewpoints on World War II, the teacher allowing students from different backgrounds to see their histories represented. today I could learn a lot of things about Sir Sayyid, thanks to Ehtisamuddin, fine? So, who actually told me, and when I could see certain things with my own eyes, I also got to learn a lot, which I was really ignorant of. This is how, when we exchange ourselves culturally, we get to empower ourselves, my dear friends. So, what is the impact? The students feel valued and engaged. Don't give examples only from one culture. Your examples should also be very accommodating. It should be diverse, because your students are from diverse backgrounds, and they actually welcome when the teacher becomes diverse, when the teacher actually talks not only about one thing, but also about different beliefs and different faiths, provided the teacher has got enough knowledge. Encourages critical thinking by exposing students to diverse viewpoints. Now let's come about a maths teacher. A maths teacher in a multicultural classroom uses real world examples from different cultures to teach concepts. And that may be also from Islamic art patterns, Native American basket weaving, and Chinese architectural design to demonstrate symmetry and spatial learning, physical learning. What is the impact? It will help students see the connection between math and their cultural heritage. Today is a world where we talk about intercultural research. Today is a world where we talk about interdisciplinary research. I was very happy to note yesterday from Professor Rejwan that he started a project on AI, and that has become very successful. Now, any person who is rigid about literature will often think, why could AI be here? What is the correlation? Maybe we will have many brickbats for that, but today we see how the world is, how AI has entered our lives. We are no more I, we are AI. Isn't it? That's the beauty of how we exchange ourselves. Now, on many occasions, you'll find that there are at times cultural biases. How can these cultural biases be eroded? Fine. If I simply talk about, if I belong to one culture and I make it the whole, that may not work. If I'm from West Bengal, naturally I'll talk about Jatra, Rabindranath's Jatra. If I'm from this part, naturally I should talk about Sayyid Ali, Sayyid Ahmad. Fine. What will happen? Because this is a multicultural setting, I will enrich my friend by what I know, and he will enrich me with what he knows. And then there'll be a beautiful world, my dear friends. So let that attempt should be there. History lessons focusing only on dominant cultures while ignoring marginalized perspectives. Today, I mean, a day before, on 13th, I had to deliver a talk on marginal literature. Fine. And on marginal literature, most of the speakers now talk about Adivasis, tribal literature. But then what happens? When we talk about Adivasi literature, we only think, because we are men of English, we only think that since it is not in English, why should we? But then yesterday I was talking to Professor Satishan, the dean, and when I told him that I have read Kocherethi, he was very happy, because that is a Malayalam novel and which has been translated into English. And that actually talks about the plight of the poor tribal people. Fine. Again, there are other works also, when the Kurunji blooms and all. My dear friends, if you simply close the door on whatever you know, you are not going to grow. You have to grow time-wise. You have to grow. You have to understand other cultures only when you read about them. There was a time when people did not think about Dalit literature. Fine. I'm thankful to Professor Rejwan. He did a book on Dalit literature. I also have contributed a chapter to it on Anand, Mulk Raj Anand. Yes. Now, that book, if anyone comes across, there's so many beautiful articles in it where it talks about marginalization. It actually talks about how one person, and when that person started talking about marginalization in those days, many people actually rejected him, dejected him, subjected him. Today we accept him. Fine. So it actually takes time. And for the first time when somebody is doing something, maybe he will come across a lot of criticism. But let that criticism help you work further in order to become better. Now, history lessons focusing only on dominant cultures, linguistic bias. Fine. There are many cultures, many languages, you also find in Indian context also, that we at times have a sort of bias. Even if I know one language, even if I do not know other language, I will simply say my language is more important. I'll not open it for others. So this penalizing students for using dialects or accents different from the standard language. Yesterday, somebody was talking about, isn't it, that when we are taught soft skills, then we are say that we are to follow that model. But my dear friends, if somebody has got a sort of pronunciation which he or she has picked because of his climatic condition, let us not try to rebuke him. Let us not try to discourage him, because it is his unique identity. And maybe we can tell him to improve. But you will always find, don't you know, that some of your colleagues, cousins, friends who were friends with you in the early childhood, and when they went to US and they came back, now you see him a complete different person. How is it possible? Fine. Because when he lives in that condition, he also tries to acclimatize himself to that condition. And that is why he picks up in the pronunciation like them. So this difference occurs from time to time, but then we should not call them off, write them off. So linguistic bias, don't rebuke any students if he or she is not able to pronounce the way you want, because we are not the sons of Ben Jonson or say A.C. Gimson, isn't it? We are Indians, we have our own pronunciation, and we should actually try to speak. But when you speak with clarity, that is your duty, my dear friends. Fine? When this gentleman, the great Indian novel, Shashi Tharoor, is an Indian. Now, there was a time when we thought that he doesn't know Hindi. But now when he speaks Hindi, we are really surprised the way he speaks Hindi. And you know, when he starts using words, we are really embarrassed. Fine. He actually points some such words that we are really bound, isn't it? But the question is that now, since he came to India, he has learned so many things. He has also learned how to speak better Hindi. My dear friends, it is in this regard, I must tell you that one of the Hindi dictionaries was written by none other than Father Kamil Bulke, who was a Britsa. How could he do that? Fine. If he can do that, why can't we? Let us try to develop a sort of tendency that we are open to so many languages. Richness through language, not bias. I remember one incident when I started my career. In my class, there were some Bengali students. Sorry to say, there's no Bengali here. Fine. And these Bengali students, they were whispering in their own language. And that was the day when I had to take their assignments. Fine. So I asked them, what about your assignments? Everybody started looking at their faces. Some of them who had their assignments, they were happy. But two students in the back bench, I could hear them. They were talking in Bangla. And then in Bengali, the meaning is that he knows other languages also. But then what he or she was saying was that because I thought he will forget it. Fine. Fine. That was actually the line that they said. So the question is, when you know more languages, it really makes you happy. When I talk to my Assamese guys, people, but I'm not happy. That's what they are saying.
ट्रांसमीटर है रिसीवर
other languages as well. Now, behavioral bias during certain communication styles, like here it is non-verbal one. No, in many cultures, we do not see each other contact, because in many cultures it is not felt good. Fine. When we make eye contact, to give respect to somebody we actually ought to know. So now things have changed. We're not trying when we are not going to talk to a father like you are. This is the cultural shift that we are finding. So there is a direct communication between students and teachers at the time, and there's a lot of gap between students and teachers. Right? So today we are living for that. We actually exchange our views. We talk to them. Some of these students actually gave us with some sort of radical ideas. The thought in it. So let us try to be that open, my dear friends. How to adapt. Factors for inclusivity. Let us try to be inclusive. In this regard,
digital mic and receiver.
and case studies that reflect multiple cultural perspectives. To that, we come to know a lot about our
USB से तो आ रहा है लेकिन वो
incorporate historical narratives, scientific contributions from underrepresented
नहीं इसमें लाइट बंद हो जा रही है
the article you know a lot about animals. There have been many movies also which actually
yes we would direct वाले में
yes. Now, when we talk about in the classroom, we should also say to it that let us from time to time take up some such texts we can talk about some topics. Recently, I watched a movie
क्यों नहीं आ रही इसकी
Karbi Hawa. Right? Now, in that movie is parallel artistic. And then how that situation actually promotes you to wrong ways. Both the protagonist and the actors, they problems of their own. Now, this is one aspect which can be understood early in the area where if they are having a sort of film studies like those and they can show this movie. But what happens? We watch the movie, we forget, come out of the movie hall of theater and we forget it. We do not try to align it with the problems that we are facing. Now, we can take some example. Instead of only teaching Shakespeare in literature today, we are teaching Shakespeare. Why can't we make our literature include works by Atchibee? So many universities have provided Atchibee. I think you also have reading my feed. Then that's your Marquez, fine, the magic. The books, and then Rabindranath Tagore, and some people also say that many people have got certain limitations when they talk about some other novelists like I always tell my students, if you really want to improve your language, create a lot of small things. You look at the architectural patterns that and I always remember the side, salary and salary. So that's the language. What happens is we simply tell them the story without having a regard for the linguistic ability, for the sort of narratology that these writers have created. There are many such authors you can read or you can also from time to time bring it in your classroom. Now, improving teaching methods, right? What they do, it actually use culturally responsive pedagogy. That's very important. Right? In a culture which is dominant, where we talk about something, you teach that text no doubt. If something is bad in the culture, and the real aim of literature is to discover the gaps, is to discover the lapses, the shortfalls, so that people, because literature is one such teacher in itself as a subject, my dear friends. Much has already been done by science and technology, but by teaching literature, we actually are trying to bring a new world where it is sort of the reimagination of everything in the days to come. Culturally responsive assessment. How do you assess? How do you assess your students? Not every student may be good at everything, fine? Somebody may be good at something, the other may be good at something else. But then how can we or how should we tackle that? While standardized testing may not be effective in many ways, we will find that in many universities, we are actually providing some such tests where we can gauge their knowledge not simply by the subjective word, but by being objective, right? There are different ways. Today, if many of you are speaking good English, that is only because of the oral testing methodologies. You are actually being gauged by GP, by presentation, by individual questions and answer, not simply the written word which you cram and which you vomit in the classroom. Fine. There have been changes by difference. And through that, fine, through the new technology, what you're doing, you are not only testing their psyche, but you're also testing their intelligence. Fine. Even when, and you know, a teacher ought to be very conscious of when he's creating question papers. This is not the age when we go for traditional question papers. You are to change yourself differently. How can I? Because the answer is in them. You have to extract the answer out of them. So create portfolios, allow students to demonstrate growth over time through projects, research, and reflections. When you're given an assignment, but when you give them an assignment, there is another problem with it that they copy and they accept. Right? But as a teacher, you are careful enough. You can understand. Right? Whatever this chatbot, or is doing or AI is doing, the teacher is quite intelligent enough to understand whether it has been taken from somewhere or it is the original thing. So please see that you allow students to demonstrate research and reflections. When you go for the recruitment, right? They will ask you whatever thesis you have, but they will ask you what is the crux of your thesis. And how, if you have to write your thesis once again, what are actually the limitations? So we see to it that you develop a sort of thinking, this critical thinking, even of your own work. How can you do better? How you can do it again? Then cultural bias and question framing, oral presentation. Provide them, not your very good speakers. So how do you do that? You did not do it in one day, right? Allow chances to everyone, every student. Empower them. They can speak a few sentences, they can at times speak only a thread of words, but then as a teacher, you are a facilitator, you can facilitate them. Put words in their mouth sometimes so that they can come from more. And yesterday somebody told me confidence. That is how this weapon lies with the teachers who build or to inculcate in them the habit of developing confidence so that they can take up the world better. Culturally diverse thinking styles, peer assessment. Not that it is by copyright. He or she will steal my ideas. We will really discuss. Many people do not discuss things, even not only among students, but among teachers also they do not discuss. That's the problem, because they think that these examples will be quoted by him or by his friends. Maybe you are also going to play this by him. So let us try to develop a sort of exchange with other people, other teachers, other colleagues, other students. Peer learning, fine. Then one of our process, we will tell them, and sort of project, we will tell them, each one of you, if I have 30 students, I say, each one of you at least read a book and give a presentation based on the book. Don't talk to don't. And what happens? Sometimes if it's along the one, you say two people will read the book. The same book, two people will read. And when they come to give the presentation, since that's an assignment, and the warning is that it is for 10 marks or 20 marks, and then it is going to classes for now. So when they come late, when they have read that, and when they express themselves, they have told you you not only judge their communicative ability, but you also judge their thinking ability, critical thinking ability, all those things, their response. So that is how, and what they
ग्रीन हो
do,
गया था ना मेरा
they are enriching others also.
बंद हो
It
जाएगा
is very difficult for one person to read 20 books in 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. But when we give such a sort of assignment, at least most of the students of that class become familiar with that book. You never know if there is going to be a question in the next examination of that book. Something by the way. So you are going to advantage others by your peer learning. And language expression difference in question framing. Scenario-based evaluations assess students to real world problem solving tasks that reflect their cultural context. Of course, every culture will have a different response, but please see to it that you accept that. Now, the role of technology, very important for him. It is a world where virtual reality has become our reality. We all of us have our own avatars. Look at today, we are having our own world where you visualize yourself, sometimes for the benefit, sometimes for some other reasons as well. Digital storytelling. Now see, if you have some people, I have met some of my students who actually speak their stories, who tell their stories on several, through podcasts and whatsoever. And through that, they also seek the responses. The world has become beautiful, my friends. And through that, not only they improving their communication styles, their speaking styles, but they are also showing the outside world that they are virtually present. Everyone wants today to have a sort of presence in what you call that another, where you have 500 friends. What is that? Facebook. Another one, Instagram, right? So you tried everything on Instagram, but the question is, sometimes people write some such things which are not accepted, right? You need not deliver everything on it. You have to be very careful. So digital knowledge also tells us that how we can make our own option when
इसमें लगा लो कि पावर पॉइंट है कोई पावर ऑफ दिस
institutions and collaborative projects. There are great parts. Now connection. What is the connection between culture and emotional intelligence? The very first is cultural awareness. It will actually boost your emotional intelligence. You will become careful. It is different, isn't it? In China, rice is very important. So when one leaves from job, there's an expression that he's breaking the because rice is considered to be the main there. So when you leave several such phrases also, which we must try to, and for that we have to develop intercultural sensitivity. Sensitivity when we do act across. Enhance self-awareness, improve your social skills, and then encourage perspectives. Seeing the world through multiple cultural viewpoints, not by dealing in other cultures, but by but by welcome. And then you can also strengthen your emotional bonding with other people. If you are that accommodative, you will have more friends and life will become easier if you go to some other country. So let us try to develop our students also in that line so that they can do wonderful. Now there are common cultural conflicts. It actually arises because of the communication styles. At times we are not able to pick up the communication style of other people, either British or American whatsoever. But if you get habituated and if you try to, then we can perhaps. Because every cultural people they speak things differently because of some reason or the other. That's the interesting thing. And again, there are certain preferences, there are certain beliefs which many of us at times without understanding to jump to the conclusion. So let us not jump to the conclusion very soon. And then do work expectations. Some cultures in the world, collectivism, there is a world that all of us must develop a sort of collectivism. Today is, you will not at the workplace, you cannot work in isolation. Today is the time when we have to work with other culture people. And in order to work with other culture people, we actually have to ensure that we become an educator. We actually listen to them. The problem with us is we do not listen to them. We simply think because we are carrying certain biases around our culture. Our culture is only important. So their culture also very important. So let's try to develop that sort of thing so that we can go better. Addressing cultural conflicts in the classroom, fine. We have to train ourselves culturally. Some training is required. For that, we can read the books of other culture. Because when we read the books of other culture, we get to know a lot of things. Then role-playing activities in the classroom also at times we can do that. Classroom agreement. This establishes ground rules that promote respect for cultural perspectives, and then teacher mediation. Teachers can like discussions to address misunderstandings before they escalate into conflicts. I mean, to be just. We are suffering from this problem that we are trying to become very judgmental. Let us not try to be judgmental unless and until we have understood from this way. Now, here are certain examples. You can read them. Teacher assumes the student avoiding eye contact, and people will feel that either they do not know the answer or else. But then that will be other result. So teacher learns about cultural difference in non-verbal through non-verbal communication and class discussions on valid cultural norms to foster understanding. It actually requires time. It's very difficult. We have to practice, isn't it? In many cultures, when you look at the other person, though we say that we must develop this sort of eye contact, because the establish eye contact in order to create this sort of rapport. But then in many cultures, there's a restriction. You cannot look beyond the neck, right? Because that is considered very inappropriate. You cannot look at a person for more than half a minute. That is considered lazy. And there are situations where people have also fallen in certain arbitration. So let us try to avoid that. Let us try to respect our structure. And then establish the respect for all communication styles policies, because that way only it can result in an inclusive and culturally aware classroom environment. And that is how we are. Then there is another example. During a group project, a student from individualistic culture, like you said, fine, who simply believe that they only can do things well, fine, takes the lead while students from a collectivist culture. Japan, as I'm saying, fine, they prefer self-decision making. This leads to frustration as some feel unheard while others feel the group is unorganized. In this regard, what the teacher can do, the teacher can facilitate discussion of different ego styles. In China, there were actually having a counter in one of the trades there, where they were giving free hacks to everyone. Free hacks. It was seen that no people came to that point. That's when they started thinking, what is wrong? They consulted a communication expert, and the communication expert says the problem is with the color of it. Because in their locality, in their culture, they say he wears a green hat. The meaning is that his wife is cheating on him. Now, if somebody doesn't understand the implication of the color, that actually will be very difficult. Like that, in many cultures, fine, when you ask somebody how was the weekend, you are interpreting with their perceives. You should not ask them about how was the weekend. Right? So you are interpreting with their perceives. Again, when you simply show your hands over your head, and talking to a lady, then I think it can be considered different because you are giving them a sort of romantic introduction. This country will go back, right? So we actually have to make ourselves learn. Two people need what is the space limitation that they should maintain. Spatial communication, we call that, because in several cultures we say time talks and space speaks. Right? The space that is very close for one culture is very distant for the people of other culture. And the same may happen in class consideration for my friends. So let us try to understand the implications of these. Now, these are culturally diverse literary readings. Many of you already are familiar with it. Fine. From African literature, things fall apart. Many of you have already read, and so we know a lot about it. The Asian literature, as I said, a lot of small things apart from a lot of small things that said, so many other things also that we can read. Latin American literature, find Marcus, find the magic realism book, and then indigenous literature. In the name of indigenous literature, it is now your choice what you prefer. Will you prefer African line, or you prefer an advocacy literature, like Pacharetu, or when the Kurinji blooms, or somebody else. Fine, this is up to you to decide. Now, depending upon the culture in which you are teaching, you must actually from time to time talk about that so that they become culturally aware. They can relate things better. But when we talk about that in a different culture where people are not acquainted with it, then that can create a sort of problem for them. General and classroom, general and classroom. So even as regards subjects also this varies. For example, STEM versus humanities bias. There is generally a feeling that in humanities, especially in literature, social sciences, and all, that we are lower, isn't it? So some cultures steers boys towards STEM fields and girls towards humanities. Fortunately, at present, I have 15 scholars working in the team. 12 out of them are girls. So sometimes on the other, we feel that now English is being read only by girls, not by boys. And this is becoming a reality, yes.
I can talk about University of Michigan,
Yes.
Department of Architecture. Maybe 2 or 3 not there on call because there was no university. And still with the Department of Education, other way around. They didn't have a name or anything, and I was not in high school.
Right.
And it was probably wrong, and I had quite an application. Have to construct on it. So I some art to here.
Since all of the yes. So now we see that trend changing. There was a time when somebody read English literature was considered to be great, and the boys had a say. But we really see, so the things are changing. So STEM by STEM, I mean science, technology, engineering, medicine, whatsoever. Fine. So we find that boys can do better than girls. But then that bias should be eroded, should be eradicated. Classroom behavior expectations differ. Some cultures encourage boys to be assertive while girls are expected to be reserved and quiet. I mean, I do not say this assertively, fine, because this may vary from person to person. And again, access to education varies. Some cultures still try boys, pulling for girls to traditional roles. I've already read that long silence. Isn't it? So that was at that time, there was actually a sort of bias. Only the boys. Role models promote equal participation, adopt gender neutral language, integrate gender inclusive teaching, encourage career aspirations beyond stereotypes. Let us try to overcome these stereotypes. And that also happens when we are talking about language, my dear friends. We can have a look at it.
We need to replace it actually.
Okay. Not working. It's not working. Good now. Should be fine. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Now see, earlier we used to have a sort of language, firemen, isn't it? Now, firefighter. It can be both, isn't it? Chairman, chairperson, isn't it? Then policeman, police officer. Now, we have to be very careful when we are using words. Supporting staff, fine? Earlier we had a different word for that, fine? Today we have another beautiful word, Dibyang, isn't it? Fine? So language is also undergoing change and we ought to welcome that change. Businesswoman, fine. Mailman, fine. Man-made, now artificial or human-made, fine. So that the other gender may not feel it difficult. And then boys and girls, students or everyone. Now see, there are times when how you make use of language that also becomes very difficult. Even though if you read the two, that is only about low ability or low achieving. Look at the words, doesn't have the capacity to learn maths, so is there any point? Now very straight. Maybe it is very harsh. But on the other way, something is not working, what might be the cause? What could make a difference? Fine. So language, we have to be very cautious while using language. It is always said that even when you have to say no, say it in such a manner that you make it no, but people are not hurt, isn't it? Fine. One episode that I often repeat, a teacher had been absent from her class for a long time. And then all the other staff members, they were very unhappy. And one day when the teacher appeared, most of them thought that the teacher is going to be fired or the teacher should be ready for the brickbat. The teacher was called by the principal and everyone started waiting for the result. When the teacher came back, they asked, what were you said? The teacher said that he only told me, the principal told me that your students have missed you for a long time. The examinations are very close. I mean, the principal did not say that you were absent for a long time and you should be responsible. No, the principal only said, your students have missed you for a long time. The examinations are very close. This is the beauty of language, right? No bias, fine. So that we should also try to practice. Now, this is what I was talking about, and the entire lecture, when we talk about culture, depends on these high context culture. There are certain countries which come under this term of high context culture. They rely on indirect, implicit communication, shared knowledge, and non-verbal cues. When a Japanese has to sign an MOU, what the Japanese does when the proposal is before him or her, they close their eyes, think for a while. So everyone thinks what happens, and after some time they sign it. Fine. But then Americans may be very hasty in taking decisions, and they can soon do that. Fine. Low context culture, they value explicit, direct communication and detailed explanations. Fine. So when the response is sought, they actually require a lot of response. That is why when there is an exchange of email between US people and some other people, US people often write longer mails. And the other culture people, if they write short, they again say they are trying to withhold the information, isn't it? So that is how they to look at the culture. High context culture people are Japan, China, Arab nations, indigenous communities, and low context culture people are US, Germany, Switzerland, Scandinavian countries. We'll also see here. This is one of the lines from Hall's book, fine. beyond culture. What Hall says is, let's have a look. High context cultures make greater distinction between the insiders and outsiders than low context cultures do. People raised in high context systems expect more of others than do the participants in low context systems. When talking about something they have on their minds, a high context individual will expect his interlocutor to know what is bothering him so that he does not have to be specific. And the result is that he will talk around the point, in effect, putting all the pieces in place except the crucial one, placing it properly. This keystone is the role of his interlocutor. My dear friends, we in communication say that when there is an intermediary, there are more chances of miscommunication. Let the communication be direct, because intermediaries often distort the message, and when the message comes to the recipient, the message is somehow changed, the communication is somehow changed. But people of low context cultures, they will always say to it that when talking about something, they have on their minds a high context individual who will expect interlocutor to know what is bothering him. He will not come directly. Fine. So maybe he feels that if he does it directly, maybe it is going to be very harsh. Now, these are some of the traits. Fine. They will be intuitive. They will stress on nonverbals. They are focused on shared knowledge. Whereas the low context culture people, they will be logical, analytical, and action-oriented. They'll value individualism, and they will take hasty decisions. These are the various cultural variables. Most of you are aware of it. There are social mores, social traditions in different cultures. Fine. We often say, act as Romans once you are in Rome, isn't it? Then language, let's try to use a language that is inclusive, not a language that actually distances. Then non-verbals, they are different. Fine. When somebody scratches his head, that has got a different meaning. When somebody uses fingers, all fingers have got different meanings. Fine. When you call somebody like this again can have a very different meaning. Sometimes it is its connotation is different. Sometimes when you say like this can also have sometimes acceptable in some cultures. Sometimes it can be very obscene. Even when you wave like this may be a goodbye signal, but this may also be a signal to stop, isn't it? So it varies. Then it also varies from one country's education to different countries, and then religious faiths might difference. This is about time and space. In Mexico, every meeting will begin after the time is over. Before meeting, they will have a lot of eating, drinking, whatsoever. So no meeting begins on time. But in Britain, if you are late by 5 minutes, they'll always point it out and say, well, Professor, I have been waiting for you for the last 10 minutes. They're very punctual. Sincerity, isn't it? Again, Latin Americans and Asians are flexible. People in Canada and US stand 5 feet apart. That is the spatial distance that they maintain. Germans and Japanese consider it as uncomfortably close. Fine. What is distant for one is close for another. Arabs and Latin Americans view it as uncomfortably far. In certain cultures, when you give them the card, they do not like it. Whereas in some cultures, people expect you to have a sort of card with you. Fine. Now look at this. Should I move? Now, how to solve problems? No confrontation, but accommodate. Fine. High context people usually avoid confrontation. Low context people are goal oriented. They always look at the goals. Japanese companies, they often use a third party. Fine. And as I said the other day also, they do not smile. Sometimes when they smile, they bring their hands on their lips because they believe that private feelings should not be displayed in public. Isn't it? Fine. And Japanese wives even do not smile at their husbands. Fine. Because it is thought that they are scoffing at them. Isn't it? So less of a smile even between two people. Fine, who are very close. Now, this is how one culture is very specific, the other is diffuse. Fine. Time. There is a drama by Shakespeare. Most of you have read Macbeth. There's one line. Macbeth is not ready to kill Duncan. And then Lady Macbeth says, to beguile the time, look like the time. Bear welcome in your eyes, in your hands, and your tongue. Look like an innocent flower, but be a serpent under it. Now, in a way, when I teach nonverbal communication, I tell them that how even in those days, when nonverbal communication, if you really want to do something, you actually have to be manipulative through your eyes, through your tongue, through your lips, through your hands, and through also your appearance. Look like an innocent flower, but be a serpent under it. But my difference, today time is a commodity, isn't it? Fine. Time is a commodity today. Asians are considered to be more punctual. North Americans, they also consider time as commodity. And Japanese, as I said, they'll think for a while and then decide, isn't it? Mexico, I have already given an example. These are the communication styles. Fine. I'm saying all this because most of my questions are also based on it. Delayed. I am overriding the considerations of time. Yes. The strategies. That is what I wanted to. Oh. The time is to retreat. Now, how can we bridge the gap? By tolerance, by empathy, by stopping ourselves to be judgmental, by having patience, and let us try to move from ethnocentrism to ethno-relativism. Relate. Yes. So there are certain strategies. Oh God. Is it working? No, I want to go to the penultimate slide. Yes. Before this. Now, bridging high context and anyway, bridging high context and low context learning styles, if you can amalgamate, and then encourage clear communication, adopt teaching methods nowadays. I think whatever is before us, the new methodologies of teaching with the use of technology, with the use of some other instruments as well, and then foster cross-cultural awareness and balanced feedback styles. In many organizations, in many institutes, there's a feedback system, but I always say, if we can take our own feedback, perhaps that is one way to improve ourselves, our personality, our teaching methodologies. Now come to the last one. And before we come to our close, come to the last one. It will come. Yes. Here are, before I sum up, let us take some of the quotes. Fine. We may have different religions, different languages, different colored skin, but we all belong to one human race. If we follow this, I think the world will be a beautiful place to live in. As we are living in a global age, we should understand and think ourselves to belong to a single family, because education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Now, my dear friends, as you are going to be teachers in the days to come, my last word for you is, तूफान से लड़ते हैं कश्ती के सफीनों में, आप फूल भी खिला सकते हैं पथरीली जमीनों में. Thank you very much. We have this also. Questionnaire. आइए.
Now the floor is open for the person participant. Please ask questions. So you can ask the question, then participant.
Wait, yes.
This is the tutorial class, and we will have a good engaging discussion over here.
Please come up with any question, any query based on the presentation.
There are certain questions. I think you have already been given this. The very first is, should teachers adapt their teaching styles to different cultural learning patterns? Yes. Should teachers adapt their teaching styles to different cultural learning patterns?
I think it's very important to adapt to. I think it's very important to adapt to the culture, because if you don't adapt, you may put yourself in some type of trouble sometimes. When I was in Saudi Arabia and I began teaching there, so in the beginning, we had many issues like those.
Right.
Because the culture was quite different there. And students have different perspectives. And they didn't know any language at all. So we had to adapt, we had to innovate, we had to do around things, So, and the cultural sensitivity was very important there. Even before we started taking classes, the director, the dean there, they gave us advices. So don't do this, don't do that. Don't discuss any sort of politics in the class. Don't discuss anything about the royal family. Don't discuss anything about this and that. So they told us.
Right.
So if somebody is not aware of it and he starts doing that, or, he may put
Put
himself
himself into
in
trouble,
very serious trouble,
right?
and some people did something like that, and then they received notices. So it's very important to learn the culture and move accordingly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please come up.
Um, it is also very important that the teacher adapts to the students' culture gradually,
Right.
because the teacher may be coming from one culture, the students from another. I recall teaching young learners, 7th grade maybe. They were used to the stick. They were used to being dealt with very strictly. So in my background, I thought that no, I will teach them through empathy and sympathy and mutual respect. I entered the classroom with no stick. The first day, they jumped around like crazy. They were laughing at me. I recognized my mistake. Second day, I came with the stick. I put the stick in front of me on the table. Everything became disciplined.
Mentally.
Yes. Then gradually, I made the students become used to my way of teaching. Mutual respect, how to speak, how to organize, how to raise your hand before. And then things started going. So even adapting to culture needs to be done what? Gradually.
Gradually.
Students adapt to your culture, you adapt to their culture. And this was just my
Right.
my
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. Now, next question is, should certain traditional classroom rules to be adjusted to accommodate cultural diversity? I mean, I repeat the question. Should certain traditional classroom rules be adjusted to accommodate cultural diversity? Yes, please. What's a good name?
And what I think is that culture should be adjusted according to the students. And there are various reasons for that, and I university is a very good example of that.
Right.
Because people come here and the culture is many times adjusted according to their and various things. But when we go outside, we do face problems in our culture, not understand according. That does become a problem for times. So that is one thing. And apart from that, there's a very big debate about the culture not being adapted. And if culture does not get according to, does not get adapted according to what the students want, what how traditions are followed, patterns or the places that they live at, then in a country like India, people will stop sending their children to schools, colleges, or whatever institution they are. So that would be a very big problem. Culture has to be very compulsory adapted.
Okay, how do you adjust in the change scenario? How do you adjust yourself in the changed scenario?
We adapt to some level, but it is not that we can give up everything. So we fight for it to some extent as we can, but I think we answer should end here.
Okay. Thank you. Now, another question for anyone. How has social media influenced students' cultural awarenesses and biases? I seek an answer from this side. Mike. Good. Any other answer? Yes? You should answer. You know the answer. Many of you are very much active on social media platforms, isn't it? Yes, please. There was the anchor yesterday.
So I watched a broadcast on YouTube where there were students, Indian students who went to Korea for their studies, and when they came back, they shared their experience. So they told about the culture there. So there was this instance where they told that if the teacher offers the drink, the local drink soju, so you cannot say no to that. You have to drink. So, and there were other examples as well. So this is how I think that listening to podcasts and watching videos and it has become a very small world when we can see other people's examples and get to know that what's going around the world.
Acha. Okay, well, Sonia, no? Well, Sonia, in that situation, what would you do? Because you are a teetotaler. What is the excuse?
Something that it's not, I don't consume alcohol. It's something that I can drink or eat. I will not say no, but it's something that I don't like. I don't.
What is the polite way of avoiding that situation? No, but how would you say no? You don't have to say no.
Die or I like I will drink or I will take alcohol.
You can say. Leave it on the table.
Is it okay if I leave it on the table?
You leave it on the table saying that today my throat is not working well.
Maybe I'm on some kind of medication. So
Right. Yes, thank you. Africa.
So, in their culture, when you guests, special guests, so, they will sacrifice a sheep or something like that. He has to eat one of the eyes of that sheep. Now, if one of us in such a situation, it will be very difficult to and of course, it's better that and similar situation, right, when you are in a different culture, slightly similar practice also following. So here it is.
Right.
And, so it's very important to actually culture and learn what they are doing. So it might give you an approach if you are in such a situation.
Okay, thank you. Two more questions. Yes, please. Please.
I love the idea that how we are getting exposed with the culture on social media. So I'll be taking the example of any genius situation. And where the platforms are exposing us with the settings and all of that, that helps us a lot in knowing the students from where they are coming, their background, and even a small podcast or their vlogs, right, for the vlog. and they are like letting us know, and it's kind of an open window that we are getting to their situations and their setups, right? So back in here in the teaching scenario, when the students from the around the corner and they are coming into our classes, they are pouring in. So where we are able to relate with them, the way they are going to grasp the information. And suppose if I take the example of a classroom setting, and I have a student from let's say Eastern UP. So they have their own tendencies. And I am able to acknowledge that difference by watching it on the YouTube. And I have like watch their lifestyle and all that. So
Right.
me as a teacher, what my role would be like, I'll be more welcoming to the differences that they are showing us in the classroom. And I'll be like acknowledging the fact that it's not going to be very similar. So my question is that first thing is that we are allowing to have adaptability with our culture, right? So we are giving them a note that we are acknowledging the fact that there is a difference. But now the question comes of teaching part. Now we want to teach them the target culture. So how is it that going to help in teaching? Like how we are going to achieve that target, because it's not always that you are welcoming the differences. Here comes the role of teaching. You want to show them the new thing. So in that, we need to be very compassionate. First thing is that. But besides that, how is the teaching going to take place? Because sometimes you need to step up and you need to know accept the reality that you will have to put little boundary, and you will have to ask them, sometimes directly or sometimes indirectly, that man, you need to level up, or you need to, play up or what. So in a very polite and in a very considerate manner, of course, for the teacher, could you please help me how this thing could be achieved?
Okay, this is a question to me. Can you repeat? Can you repeat the question? No, be specific, please.
Teaching culture,
Hmm?
we see it in the next classroom.
Okay. If I'm teaching in a different culture, fine. First, I'll learn that culture. I'll try to learn that culture. I'll pick up some text from that culture, because if I know that I'm teaching students of this culture, naturally I must read that culture. Unless and until I know that culture, I cannot. Because all of us are suffering from the feeling that our culture is only the best one. Fine? So we have to remove this miasma from our mind. Fine? That could help. And also by exchanging with my colleagues from that culture. If I'm put in a different cultural situation where my other colleagues are from that culture, I need to learn. That is what happened when I was in Assam. I was completely ignorant of it. I only knew the Assamese script because they were quite identical with Bangla. Fine. So on the first day when I started reading the board, they were all surprised. And soon I learned how they used to speak, how they used to have certain, terms like lahe lahe, dunia, fine. So these terms. And then I thought, after some time I had started teaching English in Assamese. Fine. So you have to adapt to the situation. Adaptability. Yes, yes. Fine. Thank you. One last question from my side. How can you apply what you learned today in the real world teaching or learning situations? I mean, today's takeaway. Yes. How are you going to apply what you learned today from this talk?
Are you going to apply it?
I need one sentence from you. Yes? Inclusive. Good. Yes, madam?
didn't have my biases.
Okay.
Didn't have my biases towards the students who pronounce words correctly and the students who couldn't. But the takeaway from today's session for me would be eradicating that biases, that linguistic bias, and the behavioral biases that I learned in today's session. I will definitely be applying it in my class.
Good, good. In this regard, I have a recollection. Sit down, please. I have a recollection. I once went for an interview where the interviewer was using the question, fine, and it was a question of using since and for, fine. Really hurt, and I also wanted to convey the message that you are wrong. So when I heard it for the third time, then I had to say, and I said it, I have been teaching for the last 3 years, because her question was, what she was saying, she was using since where it was to be used for, right? So I 3 sentences I spoke, and in those 3 sentences, I made use of for. And after the third attempt, from the other side came a smile, and I could understand that the realization is there. So there are different ways, and all of you are intelligent guys. You can apply your own ways and methodologies, because I believe that whatever methodologies, no one is a better teacher than a teacher himself or herself. Fine. So thank you very much. And if you have any question, you can, or else the rest is silence.
In the same class, that as students, how we adapting to place which is not culturally adapted to one.
How?
How we adapt to a place which is new first, or we cannot culturally adjust there somehow.
I would rather say read, read, and read. Fine. By reading only you can understand. By talking only you can understand. When I talk to a gentleman, I some way or the other learn something from him. How he, in a different culture, how he puts an amplitude on a particular word, how he puts a stress on a particular word. So if you develop yourself that habit in the days to come, you will be able to. There is nothing like that. So long as I'm rigid, I cannot learn. I have to see that I'm very flexible.
Behavioral bias. Are you talking of behavioral bias or linguistic bias?
Not linguistic biases, but cultural biases.
Cultural biases. You see, cultural biases will always be there. You simply have to overcome with your knowledge. For that, there's one advice: don't belittle other cultures. Rather, let your doors be open to other cultures as well. And that is how we can adapt to. Adaptability is the key word. And after some time, you get adapt to. Fine? And after adapting yourself to, you become adept. Isn't it? Thank you. Yes. Yes, yes. Right.
Such biases you never expect. And once you learn about those biases, then only you can overcome.
Right, right.
You have to realize what is the bias. So you can play the point to.
Right, right.
You have to first learn what biases are there in you. In certain culture, what kind of dress you wear by going to office, and say some other.
Of course, of course.
Very important to learn about those biases. In biases, we do some courses. There are beautiful courses on LinkedIn. Some of them are free.
Right. Majority of them are free. Thank you.
Previous methodologies to deal with students. But there's an unspoken casualness within the classrooms today because of those very lenient methodologies. Because in some way, I think it has been misunderstood by the students that a friendly behavior towards them is it makes them think that the teacher is their friend. So it also results into it also results a kind of bias in the teacher when a student behaves well with the teacher, the teacher favors that student more, and when a student does not behave well with the teachers, the teacher does not behave well with like that. That also gives birth to bias in the teacher. So how do we deal with that?
Okay, good. Only I have only one sentence. Be friendly, but don't be friends. Fine. What happens is in order to become friendly, we become friends. If you practice equity in the classroom and look at everyone in a friendly manner, that works. No one is great, no one is small. Think of the person who is sitting at the last bench as an ordinary person, and don't think of those people who sit in the front benches as students. They are the only gems. No, equality. Fine. That's why I always say, and I'm also opposed to the idea of having 500 plus friends on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. If you have 500 friends, do you really have friends? Fine. So it is better to be friendly and not becoming friends. Fine. Thank you very much. I think Professor Lindbang has come.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Mishra, for your enlightenment and making the tutorial so much interesting and engaging. I must say that it is our privilege to have you as our international faculty for this course.